sir? How you doing?
Chilling, man.
I feel like last time we talked was about this time last year.
That's right.
A lot has changed since then in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I like to kind of start an interview the way that a movie starts. So we're seeing that opening sequence of Be Real's life going into your childhood home. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we smelling?
Probably hearing some salsa music, either Cuban food or Mexican food being made, and life. You know, my mother and father, they were very much like full of life. Two different attitudes for sure. You know what I'm saying? They both did not fucking play at all, but you know, they just had a different style of parenting, separate and together. But it was cool. You know, we moved around a lot. So it's small home in East LA, Montebello, if you will. A lot of Mexicans, but a lot of Mexican culture, but a lot of other culture starting to come in, like Asian culture and whatnot, and a few white folks, but a lot of Mexican folks. And pretty much that's what it was around my neighborhood and in my house. It was just always alive, you know, because my mother liked to play music a lot and my father worked a lot and stuff like that. So, you know, when it came to the home life, it was they tried to make it as lively as possible, even through the struggle shit that, you know, we constantly were going through.
What is a young Be Real doing in that scene while all that's going on?
I'm probably, you know, heading outside to jump on my bike and ride around with my crazy ass friends that I was, you know, running around with at that time. As a kid, I was into BMXing a lot, you know, and so that's what I would do on a lot of my time before I got into other shit that was a whole lot more serious later on. But yeah, you know, I used to get down with the BMX stuff with a couple of my homies that, you know, lived around the neighborhood. There was like maybe 10 of us, and we go out just mob places on our bikes. Sometimes snatch a few bikes up on the way.
When did you realize that the music was going to be more than a hobby and it was going to be, you know, the thing that you wanted to dedicate your life to?
Oh, not till much later. I mean, I always had a connection with music. You know, I was always listening to different shit, whether it was, you know, the oldies, the doo-wop, bebop shit from the 50s and 60s and stuff like that on KRLA, to, you know, the classic rock shit that, you know, sometimes my mother's or my father's nephews and nieces and stuff like that, you know, because he had a big family and they all listened to different shit. They listened to rock, they listened to disco. My mother listened to salsa and she was into the Beatles, and my father was into the doo-wop shit, you know. So I was exposed to a lot of different music as a young buck, and I just absorbed it all. You know, I didn't like one particular thing more than the other. But hip hop, when that came into my life, that it was me. It spoke to me, directly to me. Cats that were like me, coming from the same places, dealing with the same struggles, different streets, different names, but same struggles, you know. And that's sort of what reeled me into hip hop. But man, I was listening to everything as a kid.
When you told your family that you wanted to be a musician for a career, how did they respond?
Oh, they were tripping. And it didn't come till much later. I mean, you know, like I was doing all kinds of stupid shit. I mean, I was banging for a long time. I mean, I got into music first, in the hip hop culture first, and I was fucking with that. And then I lost touch with that. And I got involved with the gang culture and shit like that. And I just sort of let go of the music, and I didn't have any aspirations of it anymore. It was fun to me and it was a hobby, but it wasn't like a thing to me anymore, because, you know, what I was doing was a little bit more what I thought was more serious, which was holding down my neighborhood, slanging, you know, putting money in my pocket, trying to survive, right? My hobby, wasn't getting me paid, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until Muggs, Sendog and Sendog's younger brother, Mellow Mayonnaise, came to me while I was in the hood banging, because we had been childhood friends, you know, and they had gotten into the business. They got their foot in the door. Muggs was 783, and he was able to help Mellow get his deal. And that sort of, you know, gave us a way in. Now, I wasn't interested. in the beginning. I was just like, nah, that's a fucking waste of my time. I ain't trying to do all that. I didn't even know if I could. You know, I was still young enough, but like, you know, when you're indoctrinated into the gang lifestyle, there, it's nothing else. It's that and nothing else. Maybe your family, but aside from that, you don't have any interest in anything else, right? At least I didn't. And it wasn't till, you know, their third or fourth time coming to me in the neighborhood and saying, hey, we want you to come help us, you know, write Mello's album, and maybe we could do something. Because I was a decent writer, you know, even like when we were just doing it for a hobby, I was a decent writer. I wasn't that good of a rapper yet. But, you know, they convinced me to take a chance and go write some songs for Mello. And when I saw that, or when I felt that I still had something in terms of the writing, it sort of started leaning me more towards hanging out with them and going to the studios, and less about me being in the hood, you know, holding it down with the homies and shit like that. And for the most part, man, you know, props and salute and much respect to my homies, my brothers at arms, you know, in my set, because they didn't try to stop me. They didn't try to hate on me and tell me I wasn't going to go nowhere. They told me to go do that shit. So they, in a weird way, my support system were my gangbanger homies. Some of my family was, you know, definitely supportive, like my mother. Definitely supportive. She, maybe even when she didn't really, you know if it was going to pop off for me, she was still supportive and whatnot. Everybody else thought I was crazy. You know, my family, they thought, you're fucking tripping. You need to go, you know, go drive that truck with dad. Because my father was a truck driver, amongst many other things that I really won't go into now. But he was into a lot of shit. But one of the main thing was he had a trucking company, Freeze Trucking. And, you know, most of my brothers learned how to drive trucks. And so that was expected of me. I was going to go be a truck driver. Now I could whip that truck. Believe that. I could drive a tour bus. I could drive a diesel truck. But that wasn't my line. You know what I mean? My line was something different. And I didn't even know what it was until I started writing those songs for Mello. And that's when I got it. But, you know, yeah, we had, in terms of the group, we had a lot of fucking haters that were supposedly homies and shit, and supposedly peers and allies and shit. And we were getting hated on all underneath. But the thing about Muggs and Sendog and myself, and later on Bobo, we just didn't give a fuck what anybody thought. We were just going to do what we were going to do. And we just shut all the outside noise off and did what we felt.
Speak about that a little bit. I mean, you guys were the first Latino group to go platinum. What were some of the hurdles early on that you guys had to deal with?
Primarily being Latino, you know, and Muggs appearing, you know, as though, you know, like they would assume he's like a white dude. So, you know, there was some hurdles there, but I'll say this, man, for the most part, hip hop embraced us, and people embraced us. And, you know, the hurdles that we had were more about getting signed, because people didn't understand the cannabis talk. They didn't understand my high pitched style, or how I was off the one and in back of the one, or in front of the one, and rapping in these fucking different styles, because everything was so like this, and we were coming in different formations. And that's because of the inspiration of Public Enemy. I mean, we were deeply, you know, inspired by Public Enemy and how their production and the way they flipped everything. So we just try to do everything as different as possible. And because of, you know, because we were Latino, and because we had an unorthodox style, yeah, sure, there was a few people that didn't want to fuck with us. Like, you know, we got passed on by 4 labels before, you know, Rough House and Sony, God bless them, said, you know what, these are our guys, we want them. And, you know, they made an effort to come get us. We were talking with the Hollywood Basic that was the A&R person for that was Funkenklein, which was our homie. And we wanted to go with them. But, you know, Hollywood Basic kept asking for so many demos. We had already given them 6, and they still weren't sure, whereas Rough House heard 3 and they were willing to sign. They had a check ready. And, you know, it went around for a minute. But you know, if it wasn't for those two labels, it would have took us much longer to get it off because, you know, we were getting hated on everywhere. They didn't understand us, and we were Latino.
Right.
And that was always a thing. So when we got signed, when we ended up getting signed with Joe at the Butcher and Chris Schwartz, and eventually, you know, through Sony Music, we asked specifically, hey, listen, we don't want to be marketed as nothing else but a hip hop band or group. Don't label us this, don't label us that, because realistically at the time, there was no market for a Latino hip hop group. You had to be just a hip hop group. If you were going to try to market it to a Latin audience, the Latin audience back then was not supportive of hip hop. It was new to them. They were still listening to Latin music. You know what I mean? Like traditional Latino music, right. You know, and hip hop was not that. Throughout the years, it starts to build and become a thing. But at the time, it was not ready yet. And had they tried to market us in this way, we would have just fell flat on our ass and no one would have known who we were. So we decided we're just going to be a hip hop group. We'll sprinkle who we are through the music here and there, but we're not going to overtly fucking exploit ourselves as this, because we're not going to put ourselves in a box. And fortunately, that worked for us because people didn't just look at us as this. They looked at us as a hip hop group, just making hip hop music. We were Latino after, you know, and for us, that was okay because we know who we are. We're proud of who we are and our heritage and all that shit. But we knew that to get foot, you know, you don't want to be fucking in a box for your career. And we seen other Latino artists get put in this fucking box because there was really no place to properly market them to a Latino audience base. And if they were like heavy on the Latino influence, it didn't go to a black or white or any other, you know, base that would fuck with it because they don't understand it. It's not their culture. It's not their lifestyle and shit. So, you know, Kid Frost opened up a door and Mellow Man Ace opened up a door for Latinos. But for a while, you know, a Latino couldn't get on unless he sounded like Kid Frost. And then at the same time, you could only get so far because Frost was the pioneer and, you know, he was doing his thing. But you only got so much of a look. You got the lowrider car shows on the circuit and small clubs to play for the Latino hip hop. You know what I'm saying? So fortunately, Sony listened to us and we were able to you know, not have that box be put on us. And, you know, we were all constantly doing shit out of the box. Unfortunately, we opened up doors for other Latinos to come and do shit different and not have to go down this path that they expected us to, because you were either going to be Mellow Man Ace or Gerardo, or you were going to be fucking Kid Frost. And we came in the middle of that and said, you could be this.
Right.
You know, aside from these other two, you have other options. And, you know, fortunately, a lot of great Latino groups, Latino-based hip-hop groups followed through. Psycho Realm, Beat Nuts, Fat Joe, Pun, Scarface, Cuban Link, and dozens more, man, you know, that came through. You know, Lighter Shade of Brown did a little something, Delinquent Habits, you know, and even
the Mexicans.
Yeah,
I remember listening to on the Wake Up Show. I know that was a big moment for me because I'm first generation immigrant, Latino, Spanish is my first language. I moved to the Bay Area and I went to Malcolm X Elementary and I didn't speak English. So I got a culture of a clash of both worlds. And that was kind of like my coming into America. So hip hop kind of became the thing that all the people that didn't fit in anywhere else, like hip hop was the thing that united us. So, yeah. But, you know, I was still learning how to speak English through hip hop. So when I actually started to hear, you know, Latinos rapping, especially on the Wake Up Show, that was like kind of where I got, this is pre-internet. So I had to like tune into the Wake Up Show to find out about, you know, you guys, the Beat Nuts, the Mexicans, the Delinquent Habits, Lighter Shade of Brown, like all these different groups. It was like, oh, okay, hip hop and also my Latin culture are coming together in one culture. So it meant a lot to me to be able to hear the funky bilingual, to be able to hear a little bit of Spanish in there mixed in, because then it was like, oh, okay, I can be part of hip hop from the culture. And I think that's something I want to talk to you about, because it feels like over the course of history, sometimes some of the contributions from Latinos in hip hop seem to have been overlooked. Like if you look back at the Four Elements, it's like, like Latinos were there from the breakdancers, the graffitis, the DJs, the MCs. And I think because on the MC side, we didn't see as many moving forward. People, I think, forgot about those early contributions from the Cold Crush Brothers, from DJ Charlie Chase to Tito and the Fearless Four, to then coming over to the West Coast and what you guys did and what Mello did and what Kid Frost did. And sometimes when I hear people talk about hip hop and the Latino aspect kind of gets removed from it, I'm like, wait. Like Latinos are part of hip hop and have been part of hip hop since the beginning.
Since day one. I mean, if you look at all the old school footage on the East Coast, it was multi-ethnic culture, hip hop. It wasn't one. If you lived in those boroughs and you lived in those tenements that where it was going down, it didn't matter what fucking color you were part of the culture. Mm-hmm. It's just that as the art became a genre of music, and also, aside from it being a cultural thing, like you said, a lot of us as Latinos pretty much took a back seat because none of us were really rapping yet. You know what I mean? We were more immersed in the b-boy culture, dancing, because if you look at the Rocksteady crew, most of them cats were Latinos. And in the graffiti aspect of hip hop, we were up in there, and we were in the DJ culture. We know that from seeing all the old school groups like the Cold Crush Brothers and all those guys, right? It's just that none of us in the beginning were on that mic when it broke. The first guy it broke for, to be honest, as a Latino, was Prince Marky D of the Fat Boys. Yep. But nobody made a big deal out of that. They just looked at it like, here's the Fat Boys. These cats, it transcended that he was Latino. It was just, here's these three dudes out of New York, big boys who are lovable, but they fucking spit dope. So they're like dope songs, and they got on like that. And nobody made a big deal out of, Prince Marky D being the first Latino to, have success in hip hop because the Fat Boys were big. They got fucking movies, everything. I mean, they were the shit. So, when you look at it, like, here's this guy who was in one of the bigger groups in the late 80s in terms of hip hop, in terms of the pioneer shit. And he didn't get no fucking dap, and that just goes to show you how, they weren't even paying attention to us like that. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't until someone made a big deal of it. Like when we came along, Sony decided to make a big deal out of it. They were the first Latino, cats in hip hop to go platinum, and it became a thing, but truth be told, there's a lot of us with that capability. And since then, a lot of us, as Latinos have sold millions of records, in hip hop, in what was created derived from hip hop and reggae and the reggaeton and all the new shit that is happening now. I mean, it's created stars. Like now that market exists, it's thriving, it's bustling. And, it's great to see that, because it was only a matter of time. We as Latin people have these major fucking talents and all this value and this creativity. And, for it to have been overlooked for so long was a shame, but, it caught up, and now we have bigger and better opportunities. We still don't get a lot of the credit that we should get, but who gives a fuck? As long as we keep it moving and we get ours as a culture, and we put in our contributions and show our worth and our value, and we make lanes for ourselves, because nobody's going to make it for us. We have to make the lane for ourselves. So in essence, that's what we did unconsciously. We didn't know any better. We were just doing this, but we knew if we got put in this box, that was it for us, and fortunately they believed in us, and they heard what we were saying, and they made it work, and it showed a template for others to follow. And as long as you had the goods and you were willing to put in the work, boom, there it is,
Yeah, I feel like with what you talked about, the emergence of reggaeton and Latin trap and all the different things, I still feel like that's almost like their own genres. Like when I turn on, let's say, the hip hop station here or the hip hop station in New York, I feel like I'm hearing even less Latinos in mainstream hip hop. And what I mean by that, I know people see like the Balvins, the Bunnies and all that, but to me, they get played in the reggaeton stations. I'm talking about in like mainstream hip hop culture. I actually felt like there was more Latinos in mainstream hip hop growing up, because it was you guys, it was, you know, Pump, it was Fat Joe, it was Delinquent Habits. You mentioned a lot of Shade of Brown, like a bunch of different groups. But for a long time, I would turn on, you know, these radio stations that a lot of them have Latin DJs as the host, like, right, they're the on-air personalities, but I would very rarely hear Latin like rappers on and I wonder for so long, like, how is it? Like, we all grew up on hip hop. Like, I would imagine that there would be more Latin rappers or rappers of Latin descent. But, you know, I'm happy that there's a wave and that people are getting jobs and there's opportunities. I just always wondered, like, as someone who like grew up on hip hop, and hip hop's like what I wake up to every day and what would save my life, like it did for so many people. I wonder why there hasn't been more mainstream rappers. And I feel like part of it might be that because over the years, our contributions have kind of been overshadowed, that maybe Latinos growing up now don't necessarily feel like they have, I don't want to say ownership in hip hop, but they don't have like it's part of them too. And that's a conversation that I feel like isn't being had enough.
And that is a problem, because it is a part of our footprint. There's no one could say that Latinos did not affect hip hop and bring something to it and have not been a part of it since day one. The problem is that you got all these stank ass radio stations, all of them who don't think we're marketable. You know what I mean?
But yet they want to tap into our culture, and that's why they have the hosts that are Latinos, because they're like, oh, and they don't want to actually represent our culture. They just want to have us as the voices of these radio stations.
Exactly. They want to have us as a representative so we can tap into our communities and make them feel comfortable with listening to the station playing all this hip hop and R&B. But they don't get behind any Latino artists because, again, it's not marketable. They say it don't test well in the urban stations. And that's a bunch of bullshit, because you know what? Guess what? A lot of Latinos listening to those urban stations right along with everybody else. And it's just a bullshit excuse. And that's why I think Latinos have disconnected and gone into the other lanes, because they feel more appreciated. They feel they're going to get more recognition and more love there. And, you know, it's the fault of these dumbass programmers that don't know the pulse of the city that they're working in. The marketing director and the fucking program director and fucking head of the station. If you don't know the pulse of your region, then you lose people. And a lot of people, that's why a lot of these fucking stations that were doing so great in the 90s and the early 2000s are struggling, you know, to deal like getting their ass kicked by stations that they shouldn't be getting their ass kicked by. And that's because they're not supportive of everyone who is in you know, contributing to this culture, man. And you know, Latinos, some of us have checked out. I would think, you know, those of us that didn't get the proper look or appreciation, yeah, out of here. You know, we're gonna do something else. And it just goes to show you, man. In spite of the push that we had and all these superstars that were made that are Latino descent, you know, you look at Cardi B, she's Latino and she's fucking killing it in the hip hop game. You know, they're not making a big deal out of the fact that she's Latina. You know what I mean? They're just Cardi B. You know what I mean? It's music. But she's in there and she's fucking getting the look and she's taking it and she's fucking, you know, making the best path forward with it, you know what I mean? So even if they're not going to give it to us dudes, at least they gave it to her, you know what I'm saying? And you know, hey, she deserves it. She's been fucking racking it up and you know, doing her thing. So at least, you know, she's up there representing on one of the highest levels that you can in terms of hip hop. Maybe it's not the type of hip hop we grew up to, you know what I'm saying? But at least there's her.
Right.
You know what I mean? That, like, you know, well, we could at least hold her up high and support the fact that, you know, they got her up there and they pushing her heavy and she's a Latina. And that is a big fucking deal, because yet another Latina who has contributed to hip hop and sold millions of records.
I'm sure.
I mean, so, you know, props to fucking her. And at least they're giving her a run.
Right. And I hope that opens up lanes for someone like Snow the Product, because I
Yeah,
feel like
Snow is dope as
uh,
fuck. She's one of my favorites. You know what I mean? And Reverie is dope too. Reverie.
yep,
Yeah, there needs to be more looks for them. It's
for
crazy.
sure. As passionate as I am about Latinos' contribution to hip hop, I'm also as passionate about Black and Brown unity. And I feel like, we're at a time now where there's a lot of elements that are trying to chip away at that and pit us against each other, whether it's through politics or whether it's street culture or whether, different things, or even I'm probably even more prison culture than street culture. So with that being said, you've been someone that throughout your career has shown Black and Brown unity through your collaborations with artists, through the culture, through everything. Can you speak on that?
It's understanding each other and working together, finding ways to work together, and that's it. Because realistically, if you can't understand one another, you can't work together. And if you can't work together, then, the divide is there. And there's people that would create a bigger divide from that because they don't ever want us to get together. They don't want us to put our money together and start creating businesses together and healing our communities, because the powers that be make more money when we're separate and when there's tension and when we're going at each other. But what do they say in every gangster movie? What do they say, right? Don't fuck up the money. And the way you don't fuck up the money is that you don't beef, you don't move on someone without permission, and you try to keep things cool to keep the money flow. You know what I mean? And you have to take that principle, even though it comes out of that gangster fucking lifestyle. You got to take that principle and be like, we can't have these tensions with each other because it fucks up our money. It fucks up our opportunities, our opportunities for opportunities. It fucks up all that shit. Because if we're here beefing with each other, no money is going to come our way. No one's going to want to invest in us. No one's going to want to invest in our communities or contribute to any cause that we have going on, because we can't get it together within each other. And we live in these communities together, hand in hand, side by side in some places. You know what I mean? And, it's about the older G's checking the young ones and saying, hey, man, it's about respect, work together. And I know that it's shit started in the gang culture and in the prison culture and stuff like that. But, while you're on the street, there's always this us against them, right? Us against fucking the authorities, us against society, society against us and all that shit. And then, us against us. And we ain't never going to win if we keep that us against us mentality, man. We got to band together and work together. And that's, I've been blessed to be able to work with cats that, normally you wouldn't think we'd be working together and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? But it makes a big fucking statement, like I've worked with some of my favorite artists, but at the same time, it was showing a bridge of unity, working with Snoop when the tensions were very high, working with Warren G and Cube when the tensions were fucking high, and right after a beef with Cube that was actually starting to ignite those tensions a little bit. You know what I'm saying? But fortunately, we looked past all the shit and we were able to get into a place to squash it and work together and show the unity, because more than anything, we got to be unified out here. I mean, especially these days, you see the division that this bozo has created for the last 4 years. I mean, it's crazy times. So more than anything, I think it's understanding of one another, what we need from each other in terms of that understanding, and how do we go forward and work together and create companies together, within our own communities, but, together with other communities, man. That's, you put your money together, you're bigger and stronger, and you cannot be fucked with. And a lot of people don't realize that. Some communities, they'll come together with certain businesses, and they'll be a collective, and all their money moves as one. So all the business ventures that they make, they do together, and everybody eats, and it's a great thing for people to have this perspective, because realistically, we can all have our own kingdoms. but we're only as strong as our own little ass kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
We come together, we got one big ass kingdom, and we're all fucking running it together, and we're all moving together. We create other opportunities for everybody around us. And right now, you know, opportunities are slim because no one really wants to work together the way they should.
Speaking of coming together, you got a new project with Exhibit. Speak about that partnership.
We've been working together for quite a while. It started from when I was doing my solo album for Duck Down called Smoke and Mirrors. I did a song called Don't You Dare Laugh with Demrick. And, you know, I was working in a studio in Chatsworth at the time. I owned the studio at the time. Now Exhibit owns it. I transferred it over to him once I moved downtown. But I was working there, and Demrick told me that he had talked to Exhibit and that he was close by. He wanted to come by and kick it, hang out, see what we were doing. And, you know, obviously he's the homie. So we're like, yeah, come on, let's go. And he actually got on the track that we had up that day, which was Don't You Dare Laugh. And the way the contrast of how our voices sounded together, you know, it was something. We felt like there was something there. And then there was a chemistry because we had fun, you know, recording. So from that one song, I had this idea called the Serial Rhyme Killers for a long time. And I did the first manifestation of it with Mellow Mayonnaise, Son Doobie, and our homeboy XL, rest in peace. It didn't work. I'd recorded an album of that, but it didn't work because Son Doobie lost his goddamn mind at the time. And, you know, I had to like just put that album, you know, away. Years later, when this Don't You Dare Laugh thing came up, I still had this idea in my head. I said, this would be a good idea. I don't know how I'm going to, you know, like what will manifest from it, but fuck it. And after we did this song, me and Demrick were talking, we're like, hey man, this could be what, you know, we could be the serial killer group. You think X would be down? And fucking X was 100% down, because what a lot of people don't know about X is that he's a solo artist, but he's always wanted to be in a group. That was like his forever dream, in being in a group. And he'll tell it, he'll say it, like every group that I was ever tried to be in, it would never work. It never worked. Something always happened. And so we've been able to do 4 albums as this group, and we did some touring in Europe off of the first 2 mixtapes. And, you know, it's been fun doing shit with these. You know, we all help step each other up on the spit, on the bar work. But more importantly, you know, we felt on this one, because usually when we do out the 3 previous albums, we're all flex work, you know, as MCs. Here's our bars. Check this out. You know, if you ain't never heard me spit on a Cypress Hill record like this, here's the difference, right? This is what I have in my repertoire aside from whatever I do with Cypress. And it allowed me to show a different side of myself as an MC. But with this one, we decided it's going to be about content and what's going on right now. So we could still flex on our bars, but the content was talking about what's going on right now, you know, with everything, with the pandemic, with just life, period. And it's deeper than the other 3. And to me, musically, it's just, you know, like Demrick and Exhibit did their thing in terms of choosing, you know, the music that we were going to fuck with. Cause like I was hands off with that. I was working on other shit with Prophets of Rage and other things. And, you know, I just didn't have time to do that part of it. So, you know, I you know, took my hands off the wheel and said, y'all do it. And they killed it, man. So, you know, that's what was up with that album.
One of the highlight tracks on the album is Triggered with Snoop. You mentioned Snoop before, but speak about the relationship between you two, because you've collaborated throughout your career a bunch of times. What is it about that friendship that lets it stand the test of time?
Oh man, we've had each other's backs since day one. You know, he's just been a dude who is supported Cypress Hill and myself just as homies since day one. So whenever we have a chance to work, we work, and it always works out because, you know, we got this love for each other and respect. You know, we both respect each other as MCs and what we've done and all that. And it's always fun. You know, we chief the fuck out. I make sure I bring the most tastiest, sticky, to the scenario and make sure the dog gets his, you know, he gets his blunt fill of it. You know what I'm saying? But nah, man, he's one of my homies. He's a fun dude. You know, he's got a good heart, and he always does shit with good intention. And he's always about uplifting, man. And so it's easy to work with him. And you know, we talked recently about doing some shit. We've always talked about the Mount Cushmore album with him, Redman, Meth, and myself. And we always talk about it. The four of us will talk about it whenever we see each other, or, you know, if we individually see each other. Hey, when are we going to do that? It's like, yeah, when are we going to do that? But yeah, because we all got this mutual respect and admiration for one another, man. But Snoop Dogg, he's been my homie for a long time. And, you know, I didn't think I would have such a, you know, like a strong relationship with my dude like that, you know, because again, man, you know, in LA in the 90s and the early 2000s, everybody had their own kingdom and they stood in it. You know what I mean? This is our shit. We ain't going over there. We ain't letting no one come over here. This is our shit. Boom. You know, we run our shit this way. And, you know, you tended not to step in someone else's domain like that. You know, to let them do there unless you're invited. But we've always found places in the middle to like fucking meet and knock it down. When he asked me to do the Vato song, you know, it was a huge thing because at that time there was a lot of black and brown tension. You know what I mean? And I got shit on many places for that from the certain motherfuckers that like live in that world and shit. And, you know, I was like, whatever. You know what I mean? It's about unity. I don't give a fuck. You know, it is what it is. This is my homie. I'm gonna fucking ride with him. And fortunately, it came out to be a fucking dope song. Motherfuckers loved it. It did unite people and all that shit. And we've done many other songs, you know, since then. And it's always easy to work with dude because, like, you know, he comes in battle ready.
Speaking of collaborations, you posted on your Instagram a picture with you and the Good Doctor. What can you tell us about that? I mean, you guys had a track together a while ago. That was fire. Some people might have forgot about that one, but you guys have collaborated before. What can you tell me about this recent picture?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the previous ones were group therapy. He had me on one of the albums, I think the Aftermath album, and then we had him on Puppet Master for Soul Assassins. So, you know, and he's always been one of those guys who's supported us as well, man. Dre's always been like one of those dudes who has always, you know, propped us up, and every now and then, you know, he'll give the other doctor a call conference, and you know, he allowed me to listen to this project he was working on, and you know, to see if I wanted to contribute in any way, and I already know, you know, working with Dre, it doesn't, it's not guaranteed that your song will come out. Right. But for me, it wasn't about that because I'm 50-50 right now. You know what I'm saying? Actually, I'm 2 for 3 right now. So with Dre, so I'm good. You know, for me, it was more of the experience and watching him produce and having him produce me in terms of my vocal style, like actually working with the phrasing and the intonations and all that stuff. A lot of producers will just let you do you and they'll work around it. Whereas Dre is like really trying to get the best out of you. So for me, you know, even if the shit don't come out, it was just I learned something new in that session. And I'm fucking 50 years old. I've been in a lot of sessions and I know a lot, but you always learn something new if you pay attention. And fucking Dre taught me some new shit, you know, in terms of producing and you know, producing a rapper's vocals, producing my own vocals. And, you know, so it was great. Whether he's going to use the song or not, I don't know. But I was just, you know, thrilled to be asked to come up there and knock it down with him.
That's crazy to hear. A lot of people, you know, see you as a legend. To hear that a legend say that he's still learning things at this point in his career is refreshing. Because as you said, the journey's never over. We can always continue learning, no matter what masters of craft we are. There's always something. There's always room for growth.
Listen, the guy who says he knows everything knows nothing.
True words. early on, I think it was in January or something, you hinted at your solo album possibly being produced by Scott Storch. Is that still happening? What's the latest on that?
First songs will come out in December. I'm gonna be working on some videos this month for that, and the actual album will drop in February. For all by Scott Storch.
What can we expect from that album other than he's producing all the tracks?
It's a more polished sound for me, but I guess, you know, people might be used to that from the work that I've been doing with Burner. You know, we got 4 albums together, man. I've been doing all sorts of shit outside of Cypress, but it's a little bit more polished. It's serious. It's serious content. It's meant to uplift. It's meant to awaken and to make you feel good. You know what I mean? It's a little bit. I tried to round it out for everybody, you know what I mean? But it's a polished sound in comparison to what I've done with Cypress, which was more gritty and dusty, different than Serial Killers, which is, you know, big and gritty and grimy, and slightly different than you know, the Prohibition stuff and the shit with Burner, because all that is sort of like a polished sound, but the difference is this is one producer, and for me, that's always the most important thing. That, yeah, I've done albums and done features with a bunch of different producers, and the one thing that I know is working with Muggs for so long, when you have one producer, the continuity of the album, the sound, the vibe is intact, because it's not a gumbo, it's not a jambalaya of producers and sounds and different beats that don't necessarily go together. Because you can have an album of songs, but can you have an album? There's a difference, you know what I mean? And when you have one producer, it's cohesive, you know, there's a sound to it. So that's, to me, one of the main distinctions is that it has a sound. It has a Scott Storch sound. And, you know, I never thought I'd be fucking working on an album with Scott Storch. To be honest with you, I wasn't even going to do another solo album. I felt like I had done enough. I was working with Prophets of Rage. I had shit with Burner going on, as well as Cypress Hill was still active. So, you know, I was working 3 scenarios, and I felt, fuck, this is just too much. But, you know, when I hung out with Scott one day, you know, he was like, why don't we do something? I was like, all right. And it happened, you know, like, because a lot of times in hip hop or even in music, artists run across each other. Oh, we should do something. Well, yeah, let's do something. Let's look it up. And then nothing fucking happens. Right. You know, it's all just a lot of shit. But with Scott, he was 100%. Hey, come by my studio next week. And, you know, we did the first song from scratch. Every song was from scratch. He didn't give me any folders. I got there, we started creating a vibe, boom, everything was like from the ground up, from the rhymes to everything. And like everything was just spontaneous and organic, which was very different for me at that time, because a lot of times we've been getting folders, not working with the producers direct, and just, you know, putting it together like, you know, copy and paste type shit. And this is all organic, which is, you know, I like to work that way. It's the way that Cypress Hill in the early days, we worked very much that way, from scratch, everything, ideas, all that. Very few folders. Later on, we got into the folders, but, you know, early on it was, you know, we did shit from scratch together, building the idea of the song and whatnot. And that's what I did with Scott. And, you know, in terms of the work, man, you know, I'm very proud of it, because it's definitely different. It's not a weed album per se, like the stuff I've been doing with Burn and that type of shit. It's an album, music album, touching on everything other than just weed.
My previous interview before you a couple of weeks ago was somebody who collaborated with Scott too. Was Black Thought. Any chance we can get a Black Thought, Be Real, Scott Storch track? That'd be crazy.
That would be awesome. I love Thought, man. He's one of the most talented MCs out there. He could spit to anything on a drop of a fucking dime. One of my favorites, man. I would definitely collab with Thought all day.
I'm putting into the ether. You need to manifest that. Speaking of collaborations, there was some news that came out on a collaboration that you did a while ago with Eminem and Booyah Tribe. Interview just surfaced about maybe some possible backstory as to how that song came to be, that maybe M was getting extorted and Booyah Tribe, in exchange for protection, asked for an M verse. You were also on that track. Do you have any backstory you can share about how that song came together, or anything you remember?
I was just surprised to get the call on it, really, because I had no idea it was being worked on, and I had no idea what the scenario was until later. But when I got the call, I was like, hell yeah, I'll get on the track. I mean, because Booyahs were my homies, they were one of our biggest, rider homies when we first came out. So there's always a family thing between us and Booyah. I mean, if you listen to the first album on Hole in the Head, it's Gangsta Rid of Booyah doing the intro. And, they're very much stating the fact that we're fucking family right here. You know what I mean? So, to work with them, it's easy. They're family. And then, to hear that it was like a track that M produced and he was actually on it, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Let's get it, because M has been one of my favorite MCs since day one. So any chance to work with him, I was like, all day. But I didn't know the backstory till after. And then I heard the backstory and I was like, oh, okay, well, it makes sense. Nobody fucks with Booyah Tribe. So yeah, well, why not do a track with them if it's going to, get you protected walking down here? But M had love out here, so like he would have had the Booyahs, he would have had us and, a bunch of motherfuckers riding with him, they wouldn't have been able to touch him like that. And they didn't, because, that Booyah song did what it was supposed to do. Like, hey, you stay away from this motherfucker. He's our homeboy. It worked. I mean, it turned out to be a dope track, but like, nobody ended up fucking with them. I mean, nobody fucks with the Booyah Tribe. So, it was a win-win.
It's crazy to hear some of the stories back then, because this is all pre-internet, pre-cell phone. So it's like, as some of the stories start to surface, it's like, whoa, I had no idea when I heard that track. That now when you get some of the perspective and you look at the lyrics and you can kind of see some of the coded stuff, it's like, oh, okay, now I get what this reference was or whatnot. But back then, since we didn't have, a cell phone pop out every 2 seconds, there's a lot of stories that kind of like get unsurfaced over the years. It's always interesting to hear the different perspectives on them.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about legalization of cannabis. There was a huge, 4 states legalized cannabis in this last election. You have been a proponent of legalization and making weed not a criminal activity. Can you speak on your, longtime efforts in the space and why it's a passion for you to decriminalize cannabis?
Well, it was taught to us by Jack Herrera. We were always activists and advocates, but we didn't really know what we were doing until we met him. And he gave us the get down and all the possibilities that could be done in the cannabis industry. And, all the uses of cannabis outside of just casual consumption. And then he taught us the politics of it and why the propaganda against and all that shit. And when we were awakened to all this information, we just went extra hard in trying to educate people and break down the taboos, break down the barriers, break down the fucking, the labeling of how stoners were looked at and perceived. We tried to break all those things. And Jack Herrera taught it to us. So we became even more passionate in terms of our advocacy and activism because of the things he would teach us. And most importantly, we knew that if you legalize cannabis, and we didn't know how it would all play out in terms of the dispensaries and all that shit. We just knew that it could bring money to the economy, into the state economy, into the national. It could put a dent in the national debt. It could create jobs. It create tax revenue. We we were taught this by Jack Herrera, so we saw it early, and fortunately, it caught on. People started listening. People started letting their guard down. Even people that didn't smoke or weren't a part of the cannabis culture, you know, they were like listening to what we had to say, and instead of going straight to the anti-propaganda, some of them were now being educated, because now, you know, you live in a world where information is readily available if you go out and look for it. There's, you know, misinformation, but there is a lot of real information out there, and people have gotten their hands on it and have, you know, become understanding and aware of all the possibilities. And now some have become entrepreneurs in the industry after, you know, all these years of educating themselves about the culture and the industry. And it's great to see that other states are opening up. And I believe that in the next 5 years, you'll see another, you know, 5 to 10 states open up. Before you know it, it's going to be legal across the board. It's still going to take some time, because there's still some places that are slow. But, you know, when you look at some of the places that turned just recently, it's a good indication that others are going to follow soon.
Did you have any idea when you guys were getting banned from Saturday Night Live for smoking on live TV that many years later you'd be owning a bunch of cannabis dispensaries?
I had no fucking clue, to be honest with you. I knew that there was a possibility that we can be somewhere close to what Amsterdam was and is, I guess, because we're ahead of them. It's just that, you know, what they have different than us is they don't have dispensaries, they have cafes. And it's a different thing, because you can consume cannabis in those cafes. You can, you know, sell beverages and snacks and shit like that. So it's slightly different than the way our retail is set up. But we knew that if this can happen here, this can definitely happen in the United States on a bigger level. And it's happening, you know, little by little, it's happening.
Jay-Z just opened up his own line. Did he call you up for any advice on how to do the thing?
He should have. I'll tell you that right now. He should have, but it's okay. It's okay, because, you know, listen, whenever any celebrity or entertainer gets into the cannabis industry, they learn quickly that they got to call one of us. You know what I mean? Which is either Byrne or myself or someone like one of us two. Because realistically, we spent a lot of time building our brands and building, you know, just the culture of our brand, even in the cannabis industry. We've been there since day one, building it, like, you know, from the ground up. So people have familiarity with us, and especially with Cypress Hill, because, you know, we've been advocates in our music as well, not just, you know, into the weed culture, but, you know, we've been into the music culture, and we've been trying to like bridge the two forever. So we had sort of a springboard type of situation for us. And, you know, guys like Jay-Z, yeah, he can easily get into this and do well, you know, if he's got the right people, you know, advising him in this industry. Because realistically, just because you got a name doesn't mean that these motherfuckers will come to you. You got to build brand trust. You got to show them that you actually give a shit about this industry, and that you know what people want in the industry. You can't just go out there and slap your name on it and expect motherfuckers to fuck with it. Because if you're not known for being a stoner, if you're not known for being an advocate, if you're not known for being a connoisseur, if you're not known for being a supporter of, they're like, oh, this guy's just trying to come cash in. And that's not Jay-Z. That's anyone, you know, that's not, you know, synonymous with the cannabis industry. You know, even some that have gotten grief coming in late, and all of a sudden, like, where were you 10 years ago type shit. And that's just the hater shit that happens. But realistically, I would imagine that Jay-Z has a type of resources that he'll do well.
I'm curious, for artists that I consider legendary, what do you consider makes an artist legendary?
It's a couple things. I mean, for me, it's consistency, it's work ethic, it's quality of the work, you know, and if you still got passion to do it. Now, let's be 1,000 about it. It doesn't matter if radio is behind you, or if MTV at the time when they were playing videos and playing music was behind you, you could still get it off and gain this cult following, if you will, right? But it's about how much you put into it. Are you going to show up for those interviews, promo or whatever? Are you going to show up to the promo shows? Are you going to, you know, how you represent your music, how you represent your movement? It's a lot of things, man. And it takes a lot of work. Longevity is one of the keys for this, right? And the only way that you get longevity is even when you don't necessarily win at radio or sell 1 million records, as long as the work is dope. If it can stand up without all the fucking hype, and you can put that next to any album that people will say, well, you know, it didn't sell 1 million records, it wasn't pumped on the radio, but this shit is the shit right here. I fuck with these guys. And if you could still do that, right, put the same passion into every album and be consistent and show up to the game, you know, you can get a run. And, you know, the word legend, I mean, that's subject to everybody's own opinion and what they think a legend might be. But for me, a legend is like Chuck D. He's never relented, whether they had a hit record or they didn't have a hit record, you know what I'm saying? Just constantly working, the consistency and the quality always there. The way they interact and treat their fans, the way they're always engaged. I mean, that's legendary shit, man. And the way you carry yourself, the way you represent you and your music and your movement. I mean, that's all a part of it. So to me, you know, he's like, that's a legend to me right there. And if people say that of us or of myself, you know, I appreciate that. I don't look at myself that way. I don't think none of us can. I think we have to just look at ourselves as artists and individuals who are doing what we love. And if we should be so lucky to have that status that people consider us that, hey man, it's just an extra medal that, you know, like we get to an extra stripe we get to have. But, you know, yeah, to me, that's what makes a legend, you know, the hard work you put in and still being there and still finding ways to stay relevant and to stay engaged and inspired to do good music. Because, you know, there's a lot of us who are considered legends who are out here doing shitty music, unfortunately. It is what it is. And that's because you lose sight of the goal and maybe you don't have the right people around you to tell you, hey, I don't know about that song right there. Or, hey, I don't, you know, maybe you should do this. You know, because people are always not wanting to risk their situations with the so-called star to not be 100,000 with them and say, hey, I don't know if you should do that. But most people that are considered legends, man, for the most part, most of them have the right people around them to give them the advice that they need. Or some of them just have it innate. Like they just know, like, I don't need to hear from you. This is my line, I know. So, you know, it's great to be considered that.